So this is a quick example of using layers and masks to do local adjustments and so on. So we'll start off by making a duplicate of the background by going Control J. Now we'll go down to the adjustment layer icon, and we'll take curves. So in this case, let's assume we find that the face is a bit too dark. We want to open it up for the shadows and so on. So we would start by clicking on the TAT, the Targeted Adjustment tool. And now you simply go to the area that you want to adjust one way or the other. If I click and I go down, it gets darker, but if I click and I go up, it gets brighter. So once I'm satisfied with the level of brightness that I've obtained with this adjustment, what I then do, because the whole image has been brightened, I will go Control I to invert the mask. The mask at this time is white, which reveals everything. But being situated on the mask and going Control I, the mask changes to black and hides everything. Once the mask is hiding everything that I've done in the way of an adjustment, I can then take my brush tool and using white and making sure that my flow is not at 100%, maybe at 30% or so, I will adjust the size of my brush appropriately and simply paint away the black, or reveal that part of the adjustment on the image. Now, as I'm doing this, you might say, well, there doesn't seem to be anything happening. But if you go to the right and you take a look at the mask, you'll see the mask, there's a little white spot here, which is in fact the area that I've affected with my brush. If I were to hide that layer, you can really see the difference now. It's quite dramatic, even though it wasn't so evident while I was doing it. So there you go. I've got one layer with one adjustment, which is a local adjustment. Then I can go again. For example, I might want to select something like use saturation. So this is a new layer. It has a white mask, and it also has a targeted adjustment tool, so I can click on that. Now when I click on that, what I can do is make a selection anywhere in the image. For example, I could select red. So if I click on something which is red, I click and I move like this. You can see the saturation on the saturation bar, the slider, that it's moving towards the right over here. So now that I've really increased the saturation on the red, it also affected the face, which is not something that I want, and maybe some other areas that I really don't care to bring attention to, such as this area here. So once again, I will invert the mask from white to black, because white reveals everything, and it's a global adjustment at this point in time. So by going Control I, I'm changing the mask from white to black, and now there's no evidence whatsoever of the adjustment that I've just made. But if I take again the brush, and this time I would suggest that you change the flow to 100. You don't need to, but you can change it to 100 so that you have the full effect of revealing of the saturated areas that you would like in the image. And using white, I can brush in the red, only the red, where I want. So of course I'm not going to touch the face, because I don't want the red to increase on the face, but I will take care of everything else. So it's pretty dramatic, I find. Anything that has a hint of red pops up. So just to have an idea of the effect, I can hide this layer by clicking on the eye here, and we can really see the difference that it has done. If for some reason I find that it's too dramatic, it's too powerful, you can always dial it back using the opacity. So if I were to slide back, I can break it right down to 0 or right back to 100%. So there you go. Now you have two layers, two different layers having each having a particular effect onto the base image. Now if I wanted to put a vignette on this, one way of doing it is again going into the adjustment layers and again selecting a curve, and you simply grab it here and you go down. You could go down as far as you want to darken it, and you might want to do that to darken the background, for example. So this is maybe a little extreme, but here we are. I have a white mask, so if I were to change this to my brush to black, I can then, I'll increase this a little, and I will reduce the flow to something like let's say 34 maybe, and so now I'm simply removing the layer effect on that part that I don't want affected. So now if for some reason I wanted something even more specific to the image, I could make a selection. I would click down here and I would, using this tool, I could, you know, very rapidly make a selection of the subject matter, and that way I would be able to affect the image much more precisely. So when you make a selection this way, sometimes it can be very difficult to know, well, have I selected everything that I want? So one way of checking this out is by pressing on the Q key. So if I press Q, I get a red overlay that shows me those areas that I've selected, so thereby showing me also that I've missed over here and over here. So I press Q again and I can make additional selections over here and over here, and I'll press Q again and I see over here. So I'll just continue this way, press Q, Q. So this is okay over here maybe. This is quick and dirty, but it gives you an idea of how to use this tool to your benefit. So now once I've done that, I can isolate that part of the image so that it's not affected by whatever I do. And how I do that is, once I've made the selection, I would go Control I, or I could go Select. I said Control I, it's actually Shift Control I, Select Inverse. And what that gives you is an inverted selection. That is to say that the subject itself is not selected, but everything outside of it. And once I've done that, I have to move away from this image back to my mask, because it's the mask. You don't want to do this destructive modifications, but by selecting the mask, whatever I do on this mask will affect only the exterior here. So I can again use my brush, and I can, oops, I have to flip this here. Did I do it right? Yeah. And I can get even closer than what I was before. So there's a part of the selection I could have maybe excluded. So there you go. So that, I'll go Control D to remove the selection. Oh, also what you can do, let's say you want to keep this selection in case you want to come back to it, you know, for some additional layers or whatnot. What you can then do is go to Select, and you go Save the selection, and you give it a name, and I'll call this one Dancer, and we're done. So if I deselect and for some reason I want to do an additional layer of some sort, I don't know, just to give it a try, let's say this is it, I have a blank white mask here. I can come in here with Select, Load Select, and over here I'll see my save mask selection here. I'll load that, and there you go. I don't have to reselect everything. I've saved it for future use, and then from here I can of course do whatever it is that I want with this mask. So now, having done all of that, if I wanted, instead of collapsing everything, merging everything down, if I wanted an image that would incorporate all of the changes that I've made with these layers, here's what I do. You go into Layer, you go all the way down to Merge Visible, you hold down the Control and Alt key and let go of your mouse button, and you have what's called a stamp layer here. So this layer incorporates all of the adjustments you've made here. What's nice about this approach is that you're able to have the equivalent of a merge down, but not lose all of the layers that you've created, all of the work you've put in, because you might want to go back in and tweak some of these, you know. So for example, if I wanted to go back and maybe add a layer, I can just hide this and add whatever layer, and then after that I could go in and create another stamp layer. You could have, in fact, more than one stamp layer. You might have one with these adjustments, and you give it a particular name, and once you've added additional layers for whatever reason, you create another stamp layer and give it another name. And that way you can go back and adjust, tweak your image with a lot more latitude, a lot more flexibility. And that pretty well finishes this demonstration.